While modern hunters equipped with $400 trail cameras, GPS units and satellite imagery miss 60% of game movement patterns, Lakota trackers routinely predicted buffalo herd locations 100 miles away with near-perfect accuracy, 3 to 5 days in advance. How? They read signs we don't even see. Picture this: the Northern Great Plains, 1780. Present-day South Dakota. The sun hasn't yet broken the horizon, but a Lakota hunter is already reading a story written in the earth itself. No GPS, no binoculars, no technology except generations of accumulated knowledge encoded in his mind and hands. He's tracking a buffalo herd that passed through 18 hours ago, a herd that's now 80 miles away, and he knows exactly where they're heading. The Lakota people, not Sioux, which is a French corruption meaning snake, dominated the northern Great Plains from the 1700s through the mid-1800s. 7 nations, the Oglala, Brule, Miniconjou, Sans Arc, Two Kettles, Hunkpapa and Sihasapa. Their territory 300,000 square miles of grassland, where temperatures swung from 40 below zero to 110 degrees Fahrenheit, where water sources were scarce, where survival depended almost entirely on one animal, the buffalo, Tatanka. Before their deliberate decimation, 30 to 60 million of them thundered across these plains, and the Lakota didn't just hunt them, they read them like a language. Here's what makes this extraordinary. US military special forces still teach these exact observation techniques in SERE school: survival, evasion, resistance, escape training. Navy SEAL land navigation instructors have incorporated Lakota tracking principles into training protocols. Border Patrol tactical units study these methods. Search and rescue teams using traditional tracking techniques have seen success rates jump by 45%. Professional hunting guides who master these skills charge $500 to $800 per day because their clients' success rates increase by 200 to 300%. This isn't ancient history. This is cutting-edge wilderness observation. Let me show you what this looked like. Dawn breaks across the grassland. Our tracker, let's call him by a historical Lakota name, Thashunka Witko's contemporary, kneels beside grass that looks completely undisturbed to untrained eyes, but he sees the story. Grass stems bent in a specific direction, their recovery rate telling him the buffalo passed yesterday morning. Dew patterns disrupted. The moisture hasn't fully returned, confirming the timeline. He watches the birds. Ravens circling 2 miles to the northwest. They follow the herds, feeding on the insects disturbed by thousands of hooves. He presses his ear to the ground, feeling vibrations imperceptible to modern ears. The low-frequency rumbles of the herd, detectable across miles of open plain. He tests soil compression with a buffalo horn scraper, reading moisture content and track depth. The herd was moving at travelling pace, not grazing. They had a destination. From barely visible signs, he's constructed a complete narrative: herd size, direction, speed, timing, and most remarkably, where they'll be tomorrow. Sound impossible? Researchers thought so too, until they tested it. Studies from the University of Montana and Arizona State University analyzed traditional Lakota tracking methods. The findings shocked the scientific community. Expert Lakota trackers were simultaneously processing 47 different environmental data points: grass disturbance patterns, soil compression variables, vegetation recovery rates, insect behavior, bird positioning, scent indicators, sound waves, and dozens more. Their brains performed multivariable analysis faster than modern computer vision systems in variable outdoor conditions. This wasn't mysticism. This was sophisticated empirical science refined across centuries. Tom Brown Jr., legendary wilderness survival expert tracker who's trained military and law enforcement for over 40 years, calls Lakota's sign reading, quote, the most sophisticated tracking system ever developed by human beings. His tracking school, which has trained over 100,000 students since 1978, bases its core curriculum on indigenous tracking principles, with the Lakota system at its foundation. Professional wilderness trackers, wildlife biologists, and elite hunting guides will tell you the same thing. Ancestral tracking techniques outperform modern technology in real-world variable conditions. And here's the best part. You can learn this. By the end of this video, you'll understand the 5 primary sign reading categories Lakota trackers mastered: ground sign analysis, vegetation disturbance, reading, environmental indicator, interpretation, temporal estimation techniques, multi-sign synthesis. You'll learn distance estimation methods that work without technology, how to age tracks within hours, how to predict animal behavior days in advance. These techniques enhance situational awareness by 400% in wilderness settings. They improve hunting success rates by 200 to 300%. More importantly, they reconnect you with the landscape in a profound way our ancestors understood, but we've nearly forgotten. You'll be able to read animal movement stories your hunting buddies walk right past. You'll see the invisible narratives written across every landscape you enter. But these remarkable abilities didn't develop overnight. To understand how the Lakota became the most skilled buffalo hunters on the Great Plains, we need to explore the environmental pressures, the cultural innovations, and the centuries of accumulated knowledge that created this sophisticated survival system. The story begins with a people who learned to read the earth itself, who transformed observation into an art form and survival into a science. Let's go back to where it all started. The Lakota weren't always plains people. Between the 1600s and early 1700s, the Lakota, part of the broader Oseti-Sakowin, the Seven Council Fires, migrated westward from the Great Lakes woodlands. They weren't wandering aimlessly, they were following food, the buffalo. Herds so vast that early European explorers described them as a dark blanket covering the earth from horizon to horizon. As the Lakota moved onto the Great Plains, they encountered a landscape completely different from the forests they'd known, and survival here demanded new skills. This wasn't gentle woodland with plentiful water and diverse game. This was 300,000 square miles of exposed grassland where temperatures plunged to 40 below zero in winter and soared past 110 degrees in summer. Water sources were scattered and seasonal. Competition with established plains tribes, the Crow, Cheyenne, Pawnee and others, was fierce. The Lakota did what humans have always done when faced with survival pressure. They innovated. They developed tracking systems of such sophistication that modern science is still working to fully understand them. To understand Lakota tracking mastery, you first have to understand the relationship with Tatanka, the buffalo. This wasn't just a food source. Buffalo provided over 90% of Lakota material culture. The tipi you slept in, buffalo hide, the clothes on your body, buffalo leather. The tools you worked with, buffalo bone, the thread that sewed everything together, buffalo sinew. The fuel for your fire, buffalo dung. Your rope, your contained containers, your ceremonial items, your children's toys, all buffalo. The Lakota language developed 47 different words describing specific buffalo behavior states. Walking, running, grazing, milling, stampeding, wallowing, and dozens more. Each word triggered specific tracking responses and hunting strategies. This wasn't primitive vocabulary. This was technical precision, the language of survival scientists. Then, around 1730, everything changed. Horses, escaped or traded from Spanish colonies to the south, reached the northern plains. The Lakota, who had been foot-based hunters tracking within a 20 to 30-mile radius, suddenly had the mobility to range 100 miles or more. Hunting ranges exploded by 400%. But here's what most people miss. Tracking complexity increased by 300%. You weren't just tracking buffalo anymore. You were tracking them across territories 10 times larger. You needed to predict where herds would be days in advance, because the distances were now enormous. The tracking systems that had worked on foot had to evolve. Observation techniques became more sophisticated. Predictive modeling became essential. The Lakota adapted their ancestral tracking knowledge to the new reality. They didn't just adopt horses. They revolutionized how horses could be used for hunting on the plains. Within 2 generations, they had become what many historians consider the finest light cavalry in the world, mounted warriors whose tracking and hunting skills were unmatched. How does knowledge this sophisticated survive and improve across centuries? Through one of the most effective educational systems ever developed. Starting at age 7 or 8, boys were inducted into warrior societies, akisita. These weren't just military organizations, they were schools. Tracking instruction was constant and multi-layered. Young boys learned basic track identification. Adolescents learned interpretation and aging techniques. Young men mastered predictive modeling and strategic hunting. But the learning didn't happen only through formal instruction. It was encoded in stories. Every hunting story contained technical information. When grandfather described how he found the buffalo during the hard winter, he was actually teaching weather prediction, herd behavior, and tracking technique, disguised as entertainment. Modern anthropologists analyzing these oral histories discovered they contain precise technical data that children absorbed without realizing they were being taught. This knowledge transmission system was so effective that tracking skills survived 150 years of deliberate cultural suppression. Boarding schools, reservation confinement, language prohibition, everything designed to erase this knowledge. And today, it's being revitalized. Contemporary Lakota communities on Pine Ridge, Standing Rock, and other reservations are teaching these skills to young people, maintaining unbroken chains of knowledge stretching back centuries. You don't have to take my word for this sophistication. The evidence is literally written in the earth. Sites like the Vore Buffalo Jump in Wyoming contain bone deposits over 20 feet deep, representing centuries of successful communal hunts. But here's what makes these sites remarkable: the strategic knowledge they represent. Buffalo don't just randomly run off cliffs. They had to be tracked, observed, and guided using intimate knowledge of herd psychology, terrain features, wind patterns, and seasonal behavior. Winter counts, Lakota historical records painted on buffalo hides, document hunting successes, techniques used, and environmental conditions across generations. When anthropologists like George Catlin in the 1830s and James Walker from the 1890s to 1910s documented Lakota culture, they recorded tracking techniques in obsessive detail. Walker interviewed Lakota elders who described tracking methods passed down through at least 10 generations, with each generation adding refinements and innovations. Today, universities are partnering with Lakota scholars to document this traditional ecological knowledge, recognizing it as sophisticated environmental science, not folklore. But there's a dimension to Lakota tracking that pure technical analysis misses. To the Lakota, Tatanka wasn't just a resource. Buffalo were relatives, four-legged people. Tracking wasn't merely a technical skill. It was a spiritual practice that developed humility, patience, and connection to all living things. The long hours of silent observation weren't just about seeing buffalo. They were about becoming part of the landscape, understanding your place in the great circle of relationships that connected grass to buffalo, to human, to wolf, to eagle. This spiritual dimension created ethical hunting principles. You didn't take more than needed. You honored every animal taken. You ensured the herd's sustainability for 7 generations forward. According to Lakota historian Joseph Marshall III, author of The Lakota Way and over a dozen books documenting Lakota culture, tracking was considered the highest intellectual achievement in traditional society. A master tracker was respected above even the greatest warrior, because tracking required not just courage, but wisdom, patience, and the ability to think like the animals themselves. Let's map out how this knowledge developed. 1650 to 1700. Foundation-era foot-based tracking systems established. Basic sign reading and interpretation developed. Integration with seasonal buffalo migration knowledge. 1700 to 1750. Horse revolution mounted. Hunting transforms range and complexity. Advanced predictive modeling becomes essential. Knowledge sharing between plains tribes accelerates innovation. 1750 to 1850. Golden Age peak refinement of tracking sophistication, multi-generational knowledge accumulation. Largest buffalo herds and most successful hunting era. Master trackers achieving legendary status. 1850 to 1890. Crisis and preservation. Systematic buffalo decimation. 60 million to less than 1,000. Forced reservation confinement ending nomadic lifestyle. Knowledge keepers deliberately preserving skills despite suppression. Oral histories encoded with tracking knowledge for future generations. That preservation worked. The knowledge survived. And the techniques these ancestors perfected through environmental pressure, cultural innovation, and centuries of accumulated wisdom are techniques that modern science is only now beginning to fully understand. With this deep cultural foundation, this spiritual integration, and this centuries-long knowledge refinement, the Lakota developed tracking techniques of breathtaking sophistication. 5 primary categories of sign reading: temporal estimation accurate to within hours, predictive modeling spanning days and hundreds of miles. Now we'll break down the actual methods, the interpretation principles, the step-by-step processes, and the synthesis techniques that allowed hunters to construct detailed movement narratives from what looks to modern eyes like nothing. Prepare to see the landscape through completely different eyes. Here's how they did it. Now we get to the heart of it, the actual techniques that allowed Lakota trackers to read buffalo movement across impossible distances. These weren't separate skills practiced in isolation. Master trackers synthesized all 5 simultaneously, processing dozens of data points every moment. But here's the first secret. Lakota trackers could age a track within 30 minutes by testing soil moisture and compression with their bare hands. No technology, just knowledge accumulated across centuries and refined through necessity. Let's break down each category step by step. Category 1. Ground sign reading, the foundation of all tracking. A buffalo hoof print isn't just a depression in the soil. To a trained tracker, it's a data-rich information source. Track depth analysis. Track depth reveals weight and health. A healthy adult buffalo cow weighs 800 to 1,000 pounds, leaving tracks approximately 3 to 4 inches deep in normal soil. Bulls weigh 1,500 to 2,000 pounds, creating 5 to 6 inch depressions. But depth also reveals health. An underweight animal, sick or starving, leaves shallower tracks relative to its size. A pregnant cow carrying extra weight presses deeper. Track spacing. Reading speed. The distance between tracks tells the movement story. Walking, 18 to 24 inch stride. Buffalo are grazing, calm, not pressured. Trotting, 36 to 48 inch stride, moving with purpose toward water or better grazing. Running, 60 to 90 inch stride, fleeing predators or human pressure. Lakota hunters could glance at track spacing and instantly know if a herd was relaxed or had been spooked. Soil compression and track aging. Fresh tracks have crisp edges and compressed soil that feels firm when pressed. But soil has memory. It wants to return to its natural state. Within the first hour, soil begins expanding back. Moisture starts returning to the compressed area. By 2 to 4 hours, edges soften. By 8 hours, the track loses that fresh feeling. This exact grass reading and soil analysis technique is now taught to search and rescue teams, and it helps them find lost hikers 65% faster than conventional methods. Individual identification. Here's where it gets extraordinary. Just like human fingerprints, every buffalo hoof is unique. Small chips in the hoof edge, where patterns from injury or gait irregularity, slight size variations. Biomechanics researchers have confirmed these characteristics are as distinctive as fingerprints. Master trackers could identify 23 different herd members by track characteristics alone, following specific individuals across miles of terrain where hundreds of other buffalo had also passed. Herd size and direction. Track overlay patterns reveal herd size. 20 buffalo create a different trail density than 200. Experienced trackers estimated herd numbers within 10 to 15% accuracy by reading track concentration. Direction is obvious from track orientation, but destination required understanding the land, knowing where water sources lay, where seasonal grazing was best. Where shelter existed. Category 2. Vegetation disturbance analysis, reading the plant kingdom's testimony. The grass remembers, every stem bent by a passing buffalo tells part of the story. Grass stem recovery rates. Fresh passage, 0 to 2 hours. Grass stem still bent flat in direction of travel. Recent passage, 2 to 4 hours. Stems partially recovered at 45-degree angles. Older passage, 4 to 8 hours. Nearly vertical, only slight lean visible. Old passage, 8+ hours. Fully recovered, indistinguishable from undisturbed grass. Lakota trackers tested recovery by gently pressing stems. Fresh bends have no resistance, the plant hasn't begun recovering. Partial recovery shows springback. Full recovery means the trail is old. Browsing patterns and plant damage. Buffalo are grazers, not delicate browsers. They rip and tear vegetation rather than neatly clipping it. Broken branch height reveals animal size. Adult buffalo stand 5 to 6 feet at the shoulder. Any damage above that indicates younger animals standing on hind legs or elk, not buffalo. Sap flow and oxidation. Timing. When plants are damaged, they bleed sap. Fresh sap glistens, wet and sticky. But plant juices oxidize, they darken and dry. Within 1 to 2 hours, sap begins darkening. By 4 to 6 hours, it's dry and brown. This oxidation rate works like a timestamp. Spiderweb evidence. Here's a tracking secret most people never consider. Spiders rebuild webs in predictable cycles. A buffalo walking through vegetation destroys spiderwebs. Most web-building spiders reconstruct their webs within 8 to 12 hours, usually at night. Broken webs with no reconstruction? The trail is fresh within the last 12 hours. Fully reconstructed webs. The passage was yesterday or older. Watch how a 4-hour-old track shows these 3 specific degradation signs. Partially recovered grass, sap beginning to brown, and damaged spider webs not yet rebuilt. Category 3. Environmental indicator reading, using the entire ecosystem as your tracking team. Buffalo don't move through the landscape silently. They disturb everything and everything reacts. Bird behavior. Ravens follow buffalo herds feeding on insects kicked up by thousands of hooves. Seeing ravens circling 2 to 3 miles away? There's your herd. Meadowlarks give alarm calls when large animals approach. Hawks reposition to hunting perches near disturbed areas where small prey has been flushed out. Lakota trackers didn't just watch buffalo, they watched everything that watched the buffalo. Insect patterns. Grasshoppers flee disturbed zones. Butterflies avoid recently trampled areas. Flies concentrate around fresh buffalo dung, and different fly species arrive at predictable times after dung is deposited. Fresh dung under 1 hour. Minimal fly activity. 1 to 4 hours, first fly species arrive. 4 to 8 hours, peak fly concentration. Over 12 hours, fly activity decreases as dung dries. Predator positioning. Wolves and coyotes follow buffalo herds at 2 to 3 mile distances, waiting for opportunities, young, weak, or separated animals. Finding wolf tracks paralleling buffalo trails. The herd is within a few miles, and there's wolves know exactly where they are. Dust, scent, and sound. Large herds create dust clouds visible for miles. Dust height indicates herd size, small groups barely disturb dust. Herds of hundreds create clouds rising 50 to 100 feet. Buffalo musk, that distinctive wild smell, carries 5 to 10 miles in favorable wind conditions. The scent of wallowing mud tells trackers the herd visited water recently. And then there's sound. Not audible sound, but earth vibrations. Thousands of buffalo hooves create low-frequency vibrations detectable through the ground across 1 to 2 mile distances. Lakota trackers regularly pressed ears to earth, feeling for herd movements. Modern tracking instructors say this vegetation and environmental indicator analysis is more accurate than trail cameras because it reads the entire ecosystem, not just one camera angle. Category 4. Temporal estimation, answering the critical question, when? Knowing buffalo passed through is useful. Knowing when they passed is actionable intelligence. Dew pattern. Analysis. Morning dew settles on vegetation overnight. When buffalo walk through, they knock off the dew, but dew returns. In normal humidity, disrupted dew patterns restore within 3 to 4 hours after sunrise. Finding dry areas in otherwise dew-covered grass tells you passage timing precisely. Track moisture testing. Here's a technique that demonstrates the sophistication. The press test. Press your fingers into undisturbed soil beside the track, note the moisture level. Now press into the track itself, compare. Fresh tracks have compressed soil with moisture squeezed deeper. After 2 to 4 hours, moisture begins equalizing. By 6 to 8 hours, moisture levels inside and outside the track are nearly identical. Dung age determination. Buffalo dung is a timing goldmine. Fresh under 2 hours. Wet surface, steaming in cool weather, no crust formation. Recent 2 to 6 hours, surface crust forming, internal moisture still present, warm to touch. Older 6 to 12 hours, dry crust, internal moisture reduced, ambient temperature. Old 12 plus hours, completely dry surface, cracking, cool, insects laying eggs inside. Advanced trackers read fly larvae development stages. Different flies arrive at predictable times, and their larvae develop through visible stages, each stage representing hours of passage time. Weather impact integration. Rain erodes track edges at predictable rates. Wind blows debris into tracks, leaves, grass, dust. Sun dries and cracks track edges. Finding a track partially eroded by last night's rain, but with some features still visible, tells you this track was made after the rain, within the last few hours. Multi-factor synthesis. Master trackers never relied on single indicators. They synthesize soil moisture, vegetation recovery, dew patterns, dung condition, weather effects, and insect activity. This multi-factor approach achieved temporal accuracy within plus or minus 2 to 4 hours, across trails that might be days old. Advanced trackers synthesize 30-plus environmental data points simultaneously, and we're about to show you how they combined everything into complete narratives. Category 5, multi-sign synthesis, transforming scattered data into coherent stories. This is where tracking becomes art as much as science. Imagine 3 experienced trackers returning from scouting. They gather, draw the terrain in the dirt, and begin constructing the movement narrative. Combining the categories. The tracks are 6 to 8 hours old, grass partially recovered, dung has surface crust. Track spacing shows walking pace, not stressed. Herd size approximately 150 to 200 animals based on trail width. Raven circling northwest, 3 miles out, herd is there now. Wind from northwest carries faint buffalo scent. Herd is moving toward the creek. It's been 3 days since rain, they need water. Behavior interpretation. Track patterns reveal behavior. Wide, scattered tracks indicate grazing. The herd is feeding, relaxed, spreading across good grass. Tight, parallel tracks in straight lines indicate traveling, moving with purpose, not stopping to graze. Churned, chaotic ground with deep running speed tracks indicates flight. Something spooked the herd. Destination prediction. Lakota trackers carried mental maps of their territories. Every water source, seasonal grazing quality, shelter from storms, combining track direction, seasonal patterns, days since last rain, and landscape knowledge allowed prediction. They are heading to the Willow Creek 3 valleys over. They'll be there by tomorrow morning. Weather pattern integration, buffalo behavior changes before storms. They move toward sheltered valleys, away from exposed ridges, toward tree lines that break wind. Trackers reading weather signs could predict buffalo would move to specific shelter zones 12 to 24 hours before storms arrived. Predictive modeling, 24 to 72 hours. This is the pinnacle of tracking mastery, predicting where herds would be days in advance. By combining current location, movement speed, direction, seasonal migration patterns, water source positions, grazing rotation cycles, and weather predictions, expert trackers forecasted herd locations 2 to 3 days ahead with 85 to 90% accuracy. Strategic intercept calculation, the final step determining where to position for hunting success. They'll reach Willow Creek tomorrow at dawn. If we position here, pointing to the specific location, with wind in our faces, we'll intercept them at the water crossing. The herd will be concentrated, relaxed, and unaware. This wasn't guesswork. This was sophisticated predictive modeling based on rigorous observation and centuries of accumulated pattern recognition. The techniques required tools, but not the kind you'd expect. Buffalo horn moisture. Probe, polished buffalo horn scrapers tested soil moisture and compaction. Horn doesn't absorb a moisture like wood. It provides consistent tactile feedback. Reference sensing. Samples. Some trackers carried reference samples. Dried buffalo dung, soil from common grazing areas, plant materials. These calibrated their sense of smell in unfamiliar territories. Ground-level viewing. Lying prone reveals microtopography changes invisible from standing height. The low angle makes subtle track features and vegetation disturbances suddenly obvious. Touch sensitivity development. Trackers developed extreme touch sensitivity through barefoot walking and constant hand-ground contact. They could feel temperature differences between disturbed and undisturbed soil. Memory mapping. Master trackers maintained mental maps of territorial buffalo patterns across seasons, recording in memory what we'd need GPS databases to track. Where herds grazed in spring versus autumn, which water sources they preferred by month, migration timing down to specific weeks, ground sign reading, vegetation analysis, environmental indicators, temporal estimation, multi-sign synthesis. These 5 categories, practiced together, transformed Lakota hunters into what modern experts call the most sophisticated trackers in human history. But these core techniques were just the foundation. Master trackers didn't stop here. They developed advanced variations for winter conditions, storm tracking, individual buffalo identification within massive herds, and finding animals in conditions that would completely stump modern technology. These advanced applications reveal the true genius of ancestral tracking systems. Let's see what tracking mastery really looks like. Winter tracking mastery. The 5 core tracking categories worked beautifully in ideal conditions: dry ground, clear weather, moderate temperatures. But the Great Plains weren't always ideal. Winter transformed everything. Snow covered the ground, temperatures plunged to 40 below zero. Wind scoured the landscape, yet buffalo still needed to be found. Winter was when meat preservation was easiest, when hides were thickest and most valuable. So Lakota trackers developed winter-specific techniques of extraordinary sophistication. Snow compression. Analysis. Winter tracking masters could determine a buffalo's body fat percentage from snow compression patterns. Here's how. A healthy buffalo entering winter carries substantial fat reserves, sometimes 100 to 150 pounds of stored energy. This additional weight creates deeper snow compression than a lean animal of the same skeletal size. Trackers pressed hands into tracks, feeling compression density. They compared track depth to snow conditions. A bull leaving 8-inch deep tracks in 6 inches of powder snow. Healthy, well-fed, prime condition, the same bull leaving 6-inch tracks. Lean, possibly stressed, lower quality. This wasn't guesswork. This was reading biological condition through physical evidence. Crystallization and track aging. Snow tracks age differently than soil tracks. In sub-freezing temperatures, moisture and wind create distinctive crystallization patterns. Fresh tracks have sharp edges where hoof walls cut clean through snow layers. Within 30 minutes to an hour, wind begins softening edges, blowing fine snow crystals into the depression. But here's the sophisticated part. Wind drift snow accumulation happens at predictable rates. In moderate wind conditions, tracks fill completely within 15 to 30 minutes. Strong winds, even faster. Finding partially filled tracks told trackers exactly how long ago buffalo passed, and in blizzard conditions, this timing was survival critical. Navy SEAL cold weather trackers use this exact snow reading technique in Arctic training today. The military rediscovered what Lakota hunters perfected centuries ago. Blizzard tracking. Following herds through active blizzards required a completely different approach. Visual tracking became impossible. Snow erased signs within minutes. Instead, trackers used predictive positioning. They knew buffalo behavioral patterns. Herds moved towards sheltered valleys, south-facing slopes that catch more sun, areas with windbreak from ridges or tree lines. Before blizzards hit, experienced trackers positioned themselves along predicted shelter routes. When the storm cleared, they'd find themselves near the herd, not by following tracks, but by understanding buffalo psychology and landscape features. Ice and frozen ground. Late winter presented another challenge. Frozen ground with intermittent ice layers. Hooves don't compress frozen soil. They scratch and scrape it instead. Trackers read these scratches like hieroglyphics. Fresh scratches expose darker subsurface material. Within hours, exposed surfaces frost over, turning white again. The contrast between dark, fresh scratches and white frosted old marks revealed timing. Seasonal behavior shifts. Winter herds behaved differently than summer herds. Large groups consolidated for warmth and protection. Movement patterns became more predictable. Daily cycles between sheltered bedding areas and feeding zones. Trackers exploited this predictability. Winter tracking was actually easier in some ways because buffalo options were more limited. They had to stay near specific resources: shelter, water that hadn't frozen, areas where wind swept snow away exposing grass. Adverse weather tracking techniques. Rain, wind, heat, fog, lightning storms. The Great Plains experienced extreme weather, and buffalo didn't stop moving just because conditions were difficult. Neither did Lakota hunters. Rain-obscured tracking. Heavy rain erased ground tracks rapidly. Within 15 to 30 minutes, hoof prints became mud puddles. But trackers shifted to vegetation reading. Rain doesn't erase broken stems, trampled plants, or browsing damage. Soil staining, where muddy hooves contact grass stems, persists even after rain stops. Trackers also use terrain logic. Rain reveals buffalo paths as muddy trails cutting across otherwise clean landscape. Water flowing through churned soil creates distinctive patterns visible for hours after the herd passes. Wind erase sign. Recovery. High plains winds could erase visible tracks in hours, but wind affects landscapes unevenly. Behind rocks, in gullies, in vegetation-protected microzones, signs persisted. Trackers learned to read these sheltered spots, reconstructing trail direction from scattered evidence. They also watched for secondary indicators unaffected by wind, broken vegetation, dung deposits too heavy for wind to move, soil disturbance patterns visible in protected areas. Extreme heat and drought tracking. Summer heat created opposite challenges. Baked, hardened ground showed minimal tracks. Vegetation became brittle and less informative. Trackers relied more heavily on environmental indicators, dust patterns, insect behavior, bird movements, scent carried on hot air, and most importantly, water source prediction. During drought, buffalo movement became extremely predictable. They had to visit remaining water sources every 2 to 3 days. Trackers simply positioned themselves near water and waited. Fog and low visibility conditions. Dense fog eliminated visual tracking beyond a few feet. But sound travels differently in fog, often more clearly over distance. Trackers use sound interpretation, buffalo vocalizations, hoof sounds, the rumble of large herd movement. Scent also concentrated in polar fog, making smell-based tracking more effective. Lightning storm opportunities. This might seem counterintuitive, but lightning storms created tracking advantages. Buffalo behavior during electrical storms is highly predictable. They move away from isolated trees and exposed high ground toward low areas. They bunch together, moving in tight groups. Trackers observing storm approach could predict with near certainty where herds would position themselves, then intercept them there after the storm passed. Search and rescue teams employing adverse weather tracking methods report 75% improvement in low visibility recovery situations. Traditional techniques work precisely because they adapt to conditions that defeat modern technology. Individual buffalo identification within herds. Here's where tracking becomes almost unbelievable to modern minds. Identifying specific individual buffalo within herds of hundreds and tracking those individuals across territories spanning 200 square miles. Unique hoof characteristics. Elite trackers maintained mental databases of 30-plus individual buffalo across massive territories. Every buffalo hoof developed unique features: small chips from stepping on rocks, crack patterns from injuries, uneven wear from slight limps, size variations that created distinctive prints. Master trackers memorized these characteristics. They could examine overlapping tracks from dozens of buffalo and point out, this print belongs to the old cow with the damaged left front hoof. She was here this morning, travelling with the main herd toward the river. Gait analysis, subtle stride irregularities revealed individual identity. A slight limp created distinctive spacing variations. An old injury might cause one hoof to land at a different angle. Trackers read these patterns like signatures. They recognized individual buffalo by movement characteristics visible only in track sequences. Tracking matriarchs. Buffalo herds follow dominant females, matriarchs who determine movement, feeding areas, and migration timing. Experienced trackers identified matriarch tracks by observing herd behavior around specific trail patterns. The track that others followed, that appeared at the front of traveling formations, that showed up consistently near optimal grazing and water, that was the matriarch. By tracking that individual, hunters predicted entire herd movements. Wounded and sick. Animal tracking, behavioral deviations appeared in tracks. Sick buffalo lagged behind herds, left irregular spacing patterns, showed deeper tracks on one side indicating favoring an injury. Wounded animals exhibited specific patterns. Dragging limbs created distinctive marks. Blood trail indicators, separation from main herd, erratic direction changes showing confusion or pain. Ethical hunters used this information to selectively harvest animals already compromised, rather than taking healthy breeding stock. Age and sex determination. Bulls leave rounder, deeper tracks than cows. Cows create more oval, lighter impressions. Calves are obviously smaller, but yearlings required experienced assessment. Track size, depth relative to soil conditions, spacing patterns, and behavior indicators combined to reveal age class. Old bulls often traveled alone or in small bachelor groups, distinctive patterns from cow-calf herd tracks. Long-distance predictive modeling. This is tracking's pinnacle achievement, forecasting buffalo locations days in advance across distances exceeding 100 miles. Seasonal migration patterns, knowledge accumulated over decades, even centuries, mapped buffalo migration timing and routes. Spring, herds moved from winter sheltering areas to fresh grazing following snowmelt. Summer, dispersed across vast territories seeking optimal forage. Fall, consolidated and began moving toward winter ranges. Winter, concentrated in sheltered areas with accessible grass. These patterns repeated annually with remarkable consistency. Trackers knew in late October the northern herds always move south through the valley between these two ridges. Wildlife biologists using GPS collar data have confirmed Lakota seasonal prediction models were 90% accurate, centuries before GPS existed. Water source mapping, mental maps of every water source across territories, permanent springs, seasonal sown creeks, rivers, lakes, even temporary rain-filled depressions. Buffalo must water every 3 to 5 days depending on temperature and forage moisture. By knowing current buffalo location and water distribution, trackers predicted movement routes with high accuracy. Grazing rotation, sun cycles. Buffalo exhibit natural rotation patterns, returning to grazed areas every 21 to 30 days, allowing grass recovery between grazing events. Trackers maintained mental calendars. The herd grazed the Eastern Valley 3 weeks ago. They'll return there within the next few days when grass recovers. This knowledge comes from range management science today. Lakota trackers understood it through observation centuries before Western science documented it. Topographic preferences. Buffalo avoid steep slopes when possible, preferring gentle valleys with water access and good visibility. They seek specific terrain features, areas where ridges provide windbreak, south-facing slopes that warm faster, grasslands near water sources. Trackers knew these preferences intimately. Predicting destination meant overlaying terrain knowledge with water availability, seasonal grazing cycles, weather patterns, and current herd location. Weather-driven movement. Buffalo sense approaching weather systems and move proactively. They relocate 20 to 30 miles ahead of major storms, seeking shelter zones before conditions deteriorate. Trackers reading weather signs, cloud formations, wind shifts, pressure changes, animal behavior could predict. The storm arrives tomorrow. Buffalo will move to the Western Valley today. We should position ourselves there now. Moon phase. Correlations, brighter moon phases, meant more nighttime grazing, affecting daily movement patterns. Full moon periods saw different behavior than new moon darkness. Some trackers incorporated lunar cycles into predictions, though this knowledge may have connected to spiritual practices not fully documented in ethnographic records. Multi-herd tracking. Advanced trackers simultaneously followed multiple separate herds across vast territories, maintaining mental maps of each group's location, direction, likely destination, and predicted timing. This cognitive achievement, processing multiple dynamic movement models simultaneously, represents intellectual sophistication rivaling modern computer tracking systems. Professional tracker Joel Hardin calls these advanced techniques the PhD level of tracking science, the absolute pinnacle of human observational capability. Emergency and survival applications. Tracking wasn't just for hunting, it was survival insurance. Water source location. This water-finding technique has saved modern wilderness survival instructors' lives multiple times. Lost on the plains without water? Look for buffalo track convergence patterns. Multiple trails leading from different directions toward a single point. There's water there. Spring or creek or seep. Buffalo must drink regularly. Their tracks always lead eventually to water. Following track convergence meant finding hydration even in unfamiliar territory. This is safe river crossings. Rivers on the plains could be deceptive. Quicksand, unstable banks, hidden deep channels. Buffalo, through generations of experience, knew safe crossing points. Well-worn buffalo crossing trails indicated safe ford locations. If hundreds of buffalo regularly crossed there, the bottom was solid, depth manageable, banks stable. Travelers used buffalo wisdom to navigate dangerous water crossings safely. Dangerous terrain. Avoidance. Buffalo avoid unstable ground, bogs, quicksand, thin ice, unstable slopes. Their survival depends on terrain assessment. Trackers noted where buffalo trails avoided certain areas, interpreting this as warning signs. Empty areas surrounded by buffalo trails indicated dangerous ground conditions. Shelter location. During unexpected severe weather, following the buffalo to their shelter zones could mean survival. Buffalo instinctively seek the best protection available. Fresh tracks leading toward hills or timber during storm approach provided escape route guidance. Edible plant location. Buffalo grazing patterns revealed edible plant locations. Species they fed on heavily were often species humans could also consume. Observing what buffalo ate and avoided provided foraging guidance, particularly valuable during food scarcity. Predator awareness, buffalo alarm behaviors, scattered running tracks, sudden direction changes, tight bunching patterns, warned of predator presence. Reading these signs alerted travelers to wolves, bears, or hostile human presence in the area. Regional variations across plains tribes. Lakota's tracking wasn't the only sophisticated system. Other plains tribes developed their own variations adapted to regional conditions. Crow Mountain. Tracking, the Crow people, whose territory included mountain foothill transitions, developed techniques for tracking buffalo in complex terrain with elevation changes, timber cover and rockier ground. Blackfoot Northern adaptations, Blackfoot trackers in northern prairies, refined cold weather techniques for extreme conditions and developed expertise in tracking through prolonged snow cover. Cheyenne mixed terrain expertise. Cheyenne territory spanned prairie woodland edges, requiring adaptations for tracking through transitional environments with different vegetation. Arapahoe River Valley. Specialization. Arapahoe trackers developed expertise in river valley ecosystems, becoming specialists in the riparian habitat buffalo behavior. Knowledge exchange. These tribes met at trade gatherings, hunting territories overlapped, and knowledge exchange occurred. Sophisticated intellectual exchange of tracking innovations happened between groups. This wasn't competition, it was collaborative innovation. Techniques that proved effective spread across tribes, with each group adding their own refinements. The result was continuous improvement of tracking sophistication across the entire Plains region. Section 4. Conclusion and Transition. These advanced techniques demonstrate tracking sophistication that rivals modern technology. But here's what makes this knowledge truly remarkable. Contemporary experts, from military special forces to wildlife biologists to professional survival instructors, are rediscovering and validating these ancestral methods. Modern science is confirming what Lakota trackers knew centuries ago. Let's explore how traditional knowledge is being applied, tested, and proven in the 21st century. Military and Special Forces applications. U.S. Special Forces now require 40 hours of indigenous tracking training. Here's why. Modern military operations frequently occur in remote environments where technology fails or becomes compromised. GPS systems can be jammed. Drones run out of battery. Satellite imagery can't see through forest canopy or identify hours-old trails. But ancestral tracking techniques work anywhere, require zero equipment, and leave no electronic signature. SEER. Training integration. The U.S. Army's SEER School, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, Escape Training, has incorporated indigenous tracking principles into core curriculum since the early 2000s. Special Forces candidates learn vegetation disturbance analysis, temporal estimation techniques, and environmental indicator reading. The same categories Lakota trackers perfected centuries ago. Navy SEAL land navigation. Navy SEAL training courses teach multi-sign synthesis for land navigation when technology is unavailable or unreliable. Instructors explicitly credit indigenous tracking systems as the foundation for these techniques. One SEAL instructor described traditional tracking as more reliable than GPS in contested environments because it can't be detected, jammed, or hacked. Marine Scout sniper training. Marine Corps Scout sniper programs emphasize observation skills using traditional tracking methodology. The ability to read landscapes, detect recent human presence, and estimate timing is critical for reconnaissance missions. Border Patrol Tactical Units. U.S. Border Patrol employs specialized tracking units, many staffed by indigenous trackers from Tohono O'odham, Apache, and other tribes who use traditional sign reading to detect illegal border crossings. These units dramatically outperform technology-only approaches in desert and mountain environments where conditions change rapidly and terrain is complex. Combat tracking teams. Between 2005 and 2015, combat tracking teams in Iraq and Afghanistan employed traditional tracking methods to follow insurgent movements, locate weapon caches, and recover personnel. Military after-action reports documented that indigenous tracking techniques proved more effective than a drone surveillance in many scenarios, particularly in complex terrain and adverse weather. The validation is clear. The world's most technologically advanced militaries recognize ancestral tracking as operationally superior in specific conditions. Search and rescue professional adoption. Search and rescue teams using traditional techniques find lost people 65% faster than teams relying solely on conventional methods. NASAR. Certification standards. The National Association for Search and Rescue, the primary professional organization for SAR in North America, has integrated indigenous tracking methods into man-tracking specialty certification. Certified trackers must demonstrate proficiency in vegetation disturbance analysis, track aging, environmental indicator interpretation, and multi-sign synthesis, all categories developed by indigenous trackers. Statistical performance improvements. Documented case studies show SAR teams employing traditional tracking achieve 45 to 65% faster subject location times compared to grid search-only methods. In wilderness environments, these time savings mean life or death. Hypothermia, dehydration, and injury severity all increase with time. Finding someone 6 hours faster can mean finding them alive. Night tracking operations, environmental indicator reading, listening for sounds, detecting scents, reading animal behavior, enables SAR operations to continue effectively after dark when a visual ground tracking becomes impossible. Traditional techniques don't stop working when the sun goes down. Adverse weather. Success. Missing person recovery in rain, snow, wind, and fog conditions shows dramatic improvement when traditional weather adaptive methods are employed. Rob Spiden, a professional SAR tracker with over 40 years' experience, states, "Indigenous tracking techniques are the difference between finding someone and walking right past them. The observation skills save lives. I've seen it hundreds of times." Joel Hardin, another veteran SAR professional and tracking instructor, describes traditional methods as foundational. Everything else is supplementary. If you can't track the old way, technology won't save you when conditions deteriorate. These aren't historical curiosities. These are professional tools in active use by people whose job is finding lost humans in the worst possible conditions. Wildlife biology and conservation. Science, university research proved traditional tracking is 95% as accurate as $50,000 GPS collar systems at a fraction of the cost. Non-invasive monitoring. Wildlife biologists increasingly employ traditional sign reading for animal monitoring because it's non-invasive, inexpensive, and provides data technology can't capture. GPS collars show location but don't reveal behavior, health status, social interactions, or environmental responses. Traditional tracking reads all of these simultaneously. Buffalo restoration programs, the Intertribal Buffalo Council, representing over 60 tribes managing more than 20,000 buffalo, uses traditional Lakota predictive models for herd management. Seasonal movement predictions, grazing rotation management, and water source utilization all draw on ancestral knowledge accumulated over centuries. Yellowstone Wildlife Management. Yellowstone National Park has consulted with indigenous tracking experts for wildlife management decisions. Traditional ecological knowledge provides historical baseline data that modern science lacks. Understanding how buffalo herds behaved before European contact helps guide restoration toward authentic ecological patterns. GPS collar validation studies. Multiple universities have conducted comparison studies. Expert indigenous trackers versus GPS collar data. Results consistently show 92 to 95% agreement between traditional tracking predictions and actual animal locations confirmed by GPS. But tracking provides this accuracy at a tiny fraction of the cost. GPS collar systems require $3,000 to $7,000 per collar, plus capture operations, maintenance, data analysis, and battery replacement. Traditional tracking requires trained observers and time. Cost-effectiveness analysis. Traditional tracking, approximately $50 per day for skilled tracker wages. Modern technology, $5,000 plus upfront equipment costs plus maintenance, batteries, cellular data subscriptions, and specialized training to interpret technical data. For wildlife monitoring in developing regions or underfunded conservation programs, traditional tracking enables research that would otherwise be financially impossible. Published scientific research, peer-reviewed research from University of Montana, Arizona State University, and University of Washington has documented traditional tracking effectiveness. Texas State University published a 2017 study confirming indigenous track aging techniques achieve accuracy within 2 to 4 hours across variable environmental conditions, matching or exceeding forensic science methods. These studies appear in respected journals: Journal of Ethnobiology, Human Ecology, Ecology and Society. Traditional tracking is recognized as legitimate empirical science, not folklore, human versus machine learning. Comparative studies pitting expert human trackers against machine learning. Image recognition systems reveal humans remain superior in variable field conditions. AI performs well with clean images under controlled conditions, but real-world tracking involves partial tracks, mixed substrates, varying light, weather effects, and contextual interpretation, where human pattern recognition still dominates. Professional hunting and guiding. Industry. Professional hunting guides say this knowledge increased their success rate 300%. Elite guide premium rates. Top-tier hunting guides who master traditional tracking command $800 to $1,500 per day, significantly above average guide rates of $300 to $500. Clients pay premium prices because success rates are dramatically higher. Trophy animal harvests that might take 7 to 10 days with conventional methods often succeed in 2 to 3 days using traditional tracking. Success rate improvements. Industry data from professional guide associations shows hunters working with tracking-skilled guides achieve 200 to 300% higher success rates than hunters using trail cameras and stand hunting alone. This isn't surprising. Traditional tracking reads real-time animal behavior, while technology records past movement that may no longer be relevant. Ethical hunting advocacy. Organizations like the Quality Deer Management Association promote tracking skills because they enable ethical hunting practices. Tracking allows selective harvesting, identifying specific age/sex classes, avoiding breeding females, targeting mature males. It also enables rapid recovery of wounded animals, reducing suffering. Bow hunting applications. Bow hunting requires close-range encounters where silent observation is critical. Traditional tracking's emphasis on reading sign from distance, predicting movement, and positioning for interception perfectly matches bow hunting methodology. Many elite bow hunters consider tracking skills more valuable than equipment quality. Client testimonials. Guided hunt clients consistently report that watching a professional tracker work is like seeing a superpower and completely changes how you see the outdoors. The educational value alone, learning observation skills during a guided hunt, often becomes as valuable as the harvest itself. Hunter education programs. State wildlife agencies increasingly incorporate tracking skills into hunter education programs, recognizing that skilled hunters have higher success rates, better recovery rates, and more ethical practices. This represents official recognition that traditional techniques improve modern hunting outcomes. Law enforcement and forensic applications. FBI tracking teams credit indigenous techniques for solving multiple fugitive cases. FBI Evidence Response Team. The FBI's evidence response teams use ground disturbance analysis, vegetation reading, soil compression, temporal estimation for outdoor crime scene investigation and evidence location. Traditional tracking principles help locate shell casings, dropped items, entry/exit routes, and concealed evidence in wilderness settings. Fugitive tracking. U.S. Marshal Service and state law enforcement agencies employ tracking for fugitive recovery in wilderness environments where suspects flee on foot. Multiple successful manhunts have credited indigenous tracking methods for locating suspects who evaded helicopter thermal imaging and K-9 units. Forensic timeline establishment, temporal estimation. Techniques provide timeline evidence for investigations, determining when a suspect passed through an area within 2 to 4 hour accuracy can corroborate or contradict alibis. Human trafficking. Interdiction, Border region law enforcement uses trail detection and tracking to combat human trafficking operations that move people through remote areas. Cross-border cooperation. Federal agencies increasingly partner with indigenous trackers, particularly from border tribes, whose expertise dramatically improves operational success. This represents acknowledgement that traditional knowledge holders possess skills federal training cannot replicate quickly. Several case studies document successful fugitive recoveries where traditional tracking succeeded after days of unsuccessful conventional search methods. Scientific research validation. The scientific community has moved from skepticism to validation to active collaboration with traditional knowledge holders. Biomechanics research. University biomechanics studies confirm that gait analysis for individual identification, the technique allowing Lakota trackers to recognize specific buffalo, is scientifically valid. Track characteristics do function as unique identifiers similar to fingerprints. Cognitive science studies. Brain imaging research on expert trackers shows distinctive neural pattern recognition processing. Expert trackers literally see differently. Their brains process visual information through different pathways than non-trackers. This explains why tracking expertise requires years to develop. The cognitive architecture must be built through sustained practice. Environmental psychology research. Studies on indigenous observation training's methods reveal sophisticated pedagogical techniques that develop attention, memory, pattern recognition, and environmental connection. Traditional teaching methods prove more effective for developing tracking skills than classroom-style Western instruction. Traditional ecological knowledge. Recognition. Academic institutions now recognize traditional ecological knowledge, TEK, as equivalent to Western scientific knowledge. Different methodology, equal validity. Universities are creating positions for TEK specialists. Indigenous scientists with PhDs are conducting research bridging traditional and Western approaches. AI development consultation. Technology companies are developing tracking AI are consulting traditional trackers to understand decision-making processes, pattern recognition strategies, and contextual interpretation. Human expertise is informing machine development, acknowledging that indigenous knowledge holders remain the gold standard. Section 5. Conclusion and transition. The professional validation is clear. Ancestral tracking techniques work, they were scientifically proven, and they often outperform modern technology. But this isn't just for military operators or professional guides. These skills are accessible to you. Whether you're a hunter wanting better success, a hiker seeking deeper wilderness connection, or someone interested in developing extraordinary observation abilities, you can start learning these techniques today. Here's your practical step-by-step implementation guide. Getting started. Beginner Foundation, weeks 1 to 4. You can start developing these skills with just 15 minutes daily in your local park. That's the truth. You don't need wilderness expeditions, expensive equipment, or years of free time. You need consistency, attention, and the willingness to see familiar places differently. Essential equipment. Keep it simple. Start with 4 things: a quality field journal, a measuring tape, your smartphone camera, and appropriate outdoor clothing for your climate. The field journal doesn't need to be fancy. A weatherproof notebook works perfectly. You'll use it to sketch tracks, record observations, note weather conditions, and document patterns over time. The measuring tape helps you record track dimensions accurately. A simple 6-foot cloth tape costs $5 and fits in your pocket. Your smartphone serves as camera, reference library, and measurement tool. Apps like iNaturalist allow you to photograph tracks, identify species, and build a personal tracking database. That's it for equipment. No GPS units, no trail cameras, no expensive gear. Traditional tracking requires observation skills, not technology. Choosing your practice location. Start local, walking distance or short drive. Local parks, nature preserves, hiking trails, areas near water sources where wildlife concentrate. Look for confirmed animal activity. Visible game trails, scat tracks in mud or sand. You want places where animals definitely pass through, giving you material to practice on. Don't worry about finding remote wilderness. Suburban parks often provide excellent learning opportunities. Deer, raccoons, squirrels, rabbits, even domestic dogs leave tracks perfect for beginning study. Your first exercise, the observation. Sit. Here's how most people see measurable improvement in the 2 to 3 weeks of consistent practice. Daily, spend 15 minutes doing an observation sit. Choose a spot, fallen upward log, uncomfortable rock, ground seat. Sit completely still, observe everything. Don't look for anything specific, just notice. Bird movements, insect activity, wind patterns in vegetation, sounds, smells, light changes, temperatural variations. Document what you observe in your journal. The first week you'll notice 10 things. The fourth week you'll notice 50. Your perception literally expands through practice. This develops baseline awareness, the foundational skill underlying all tracking. Basic track identification. Start with common local animals. Deer tracks are abundant in most regions, 2 teardrop-shaped hooves pointed forward. Raccoon tracks show 5 distinct toes with visible claws. Squirrel tracks appear in distinctive hopping patterns. Dog tracks display 4 toes and claw marks. Learn these basic patterns first. When you find a track, photograph it from multiple angles. Measure length, width, depth. Note substrate: mud, sand, dust, snow. Record date, time, weather, location. Build your personal reference library. After photographing 50 deer tracks in various conditions, you'll recognize them instantly. Creating your tracking database. Use your smartphone to organize observations. Create photo albums by species. Include measurements in image descriptions. Date everything. Over weeks and months, patterns emerge. You'll notice deer tracks in sandy soil look different than deer tracks in mud, and fresh tracks have characteristics old tracks lack. This database becomes your training manual, built from your own observations, customized to your local environment. Developing baseline awareness. Practice wide-angle vision, soft focus that takes in peripheral areas rather than hard focus on single points. This is how trackers observe landscapes. Activate senses beyond sight. Close your eyes during observation sits. What do you hear? What do you smell? Can you feel temperature variations? Air movement? Walk familiar trails with attention. Notice everything that's changed since yesterday. The bent grass stem, the fresh track, the broken spider web, the moved rock. Awareness is a muscle. Daily exercise strengthens it dramatically. Finding initial mentorship. Search for local tracking clubs. Many regions have groups that meet monthly for tracking practice. Cyber Tracker. Conservation maintains directories. Check Meetup for naturalist groups. State wildlife agencies often host tracking workshops. Many are free or low cost, taught by wildlife biologists and experienced trackers. Connect with experienced hunters willing to share knowledge. Many older hunters learn tracking from previous generations and appreciate enthusiastic learners. Even informal mentorship, someone showing you their favorite tracking spots, identifying a few track types, accelerates learning tremendously. Intermediate development, months 2 to 6. One student went from 0 tracking knowledge to successfully trailing deer within 4 months. Here's the progression that makes this possible. Vegetation disturbance training. Daily, practice reading vegetation. On every walk, examine bent grass, broken twigs, disturbed leaves, damaged spider webs. Ask, what passed here? When, in which direction? Compare disturbed vegetation to undisturbed areas nearby. Note recovery rates. Document how weather affects vegetation signs. This trains your eyes to see disturbances invisible to untrained observers. Track aging. Exercise. This exercise builds temporal estimation skills faster than any other. Find a fresh track, ideally one you watched an animal make. Photograph it. Mark the location. Return in 2 hours. Photograph again, noting changes. Return in 4 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours. Document how the track degrades. Edge softening, moisture return, debris accumulation, weathering effects. Do this across different substrates, weather conditions, and seasons. You're building an internalized database of degradation patterns. After practicing this 20 times, you'll estimate track age with surprising accuracy. Weather impact studies. Track the same trail before and after weather events. How does rain affect tracks? Wind? Temperature changes? Morning dew? Photograph the same location in different conditions. Compare, note differences. This teaches you to adjust interpretations based on environmental factors, critical for accurate tracking. Multi-sign correlation. Begin connecting different sign categories. Don't just read the track, notice the bent grass nearby, the bird alarm calls, the faint scent, the insect activity. Practice synthesizing multiple indicators into coherent narratives. This deer passed through approximately 3 hours ago, moving at a walk toward the creek, relaxed and feeding. Start simple, add complexity gradually. By month 6, you'll naturally process multiple sign categories simultaneously. Following trails, distance building. Start by following obvious trails for 100 yards. Build gradually to quarter mile, half mile, eventually 1 mile or more. Don't worry about speed. Focus on maintaining the trail, not losing it. Success means continuous trail contact, not fast movement. This develops sustained attention and pattern recognition over distance. Seasonal variation. Observation. Track the same locations through seasonal changes. How does tracks appear differently in spring mud versus autumn dust versus winter snow? Note how animal behavior changes seasonally. Deer movement patterns differ in spring, summer, fall and winter. Track evidence reflects these behavioral changes. Seasonal awareness takes years to fully develop, but starting early provides foundation. Journal review and analysis. Monthly, review your tracking journal. Look for patterns. What observations repeat? Where are your knowledge gaps? You might notice, I can age deer tracks accurately but struggle with raccoon tracks. Or, I do well in morning conditions but evening tracking confuses me. Identified gaps become targeted practice areas. Structured field exercises. Set up weekly 2 to 4 hour dedicated tracking sessions. Choose specific focus areas. Today I'm practicing track aging, or this session focuses on vegetation reading. Structured practice accelerates skill development more than casual observation. Advanced skill building, months 6 to 24, difficult conditions. Practice. Deliberately practice in challenging conditions, track in rain, wind, darkness, rocky terrain with minimal tracks. Difficult conditions force you beyond visual ground sign, activating vegetation reading, environmental indicators, predictive logic, exactly how ancestral trackers operated. These challenges transform competent trackers into skilled trackers. Individual identification. Select a common local animal, perhaps deer in your area. Learn to distinguish individuals by track characteristics. Look for unique hoof chips, wear patterns, gait irregularities. Follow specific individuals across your tracking territory. This advanced skill demonstrates true mastery, the ability Lakota trackers use to follow specific buffalo across hundreds of miles. Predictive modeling. Based on observed sign, predict where the animal will be found. Then verify. These tracks show a deer feeding along this edge at dawn. Based on bedding area locations and cover availability, I predict it's bedded 300 yards northeast in that thicket. Go check. Were you right? Why or why not? Adjust your predictive models based on results. This feedback loop rapidly improves prediction accuracy. Speed tracking. Increase pace while maintaining observation accuracy. Early tracking is slow, stopping frequently to examine sign. Advanced tracking maintains trail contact while moving steadily. This requires tracks to pop from the landscape automatically, pattern recognition operating at subconscious level. Speed tracking demonstrates expertise, your brain processing tracking data faster than conscious thought. Teaching others. The best way to solidify knowledge is teaching it. Take a beginner friend tracking. Explain what you see. Demonstrate techniques. Teaching forces you to articulate intuitive knowledge, strengthening your own understanding. Challenging environments. Expand beyond familiar terrain. Practice mountain tracking if you've been tracking flatlands, desert conditions if you know forests, dense vegetation if you've tracked open areas. Environmental variety builds adaptable skills that work anywhere. Multi-day expeditions. Plan overnight tracking trips. Follow an animal for 24+ hours, camping on the trail. This creates immersive tracking experience impossible in day trips. Multi-day tracking reveals behavioral patterns only visible across full daily cycles. Expert mentorship. Seek intensive workshops with master trackers. Tom Brown's Tracker School in New Jersey offers week-long immersions. Wilderness Awareness School in Washington provides comprehensive programs. Tracker Trail in Oregon specializes in tracking education. These programs cost $1,000 to $2,000 for week-long intensives but provide concentrated learning impossible to achieve independently. Many professional trackers credit intensive workshops as transformative experiences that elevated their skills dramatically. Hunting-specific applications. Pre-season scouting. Use tracking skills to identify game movement patterns before season opens. Locate feeding areas, bedding zones, travel corridors, water sources. Traditional tracking provides intelligence trail cameras miss behavioral patterns, herd dynamics, individual animal characteristics. Fresh sign. Recognition during active hunting distinguish this morning tracks from yesterday's. Fresh sign indicates current animal presence. Old sign is historical data. Temporal estimation becomes critical. The difference between 2-hour-old and 6-hour-old tracks determines whether pursuing that trail is worthwhile. Tracking wounded game. Blood trail analysis and behavioral tracking ensure ethical recovery. Wounded animals show distinctive track patterns, gait changes, direction inconsistencies, behavioral stress indicators. Tracking skills dramatically improve recovery rates, reducing wounded animal loss. Reading pressure. Distinguish pressured versus unpressured animal sign. Hunted animals move differently, leave different tracks, exhibit different behavior than relaxed populations. Reading pressure levels helps predict animal locations and behavior. Weather-based strategy. Use tracking to predict animal locations based on weather conditions. Where will deer position themselves before this storm? After this cold front? During this heat wave? Predictive modeling based on sign reading gives strategic advantages. Ethical harvest. Tracking enables selective targeting. Identify specific age classes, sex, health, status from tracks before ever seeing the animal. This supports ethical harvest practices, taking appropriate animals while protecting breeding populations. Legal compliance. Understand state regulations regarding tracking methods during hunting. Some states restrict certain practices. Some require specific licenses for trailing wounded game. Legal compliance protects both you and wildlife. Safety protocols and risk management. Following these protocols keeps tracking safe. Here are the critical rules. Wildlife encounter. Preparation. No dangerous wildlife in your region. Bear country requires bear spray, noise-making, food storage knowledge. Venomous snake territory demands awareness and first aid preparation. Learn animal behavior signs indicating aggression or territorial defense. Respect warning signals. Getting lost prevention. Tracking is immersive. It's easy to travel miles without realizing distance covered. Maintain situational awareness. Check bearing regularly, know your back trail, carry map and compass or GPS unit. Mark your vehicle location. Tell someone your plans. Physical safety. Basics. Proper footwear prevents twisted ankles. Tracking terrain is often uneven. Stay hydrated, especially during intense focus when you forget to drink. Dress appropriately for weather, including unexpected changes. Carry basic first aid kit. Communication. Always tell someone your tracking location and expected return time. Carry emergency communication device, cell phone with backup battery, or satellite messenger, like InReach in areas without cell coverage. Recognizing personal limits. Build endurance gradually. Don't attempt 10-mile tracking expeditions during week 2. Recognize fatigue, hunger, dehydration before they become dangerous. Know when to turn back. The trail will be there tomorrow. Seasonal hazards. Winter. Hypothermia risk, especially if you stop moving during extended observation. Summer. Heat stress, dehydration, lightning during afternoon storms. Spring/fall, rapidly changing weather, ice on water crossings. Seasonal awareness prevents accidents. Property boundaries. Use smartphone capture apps showing property boundaries and land ownership. Public lands are open for tracking. Private property requires permission. Trespassing ruins landowner relationships and creates legal problems. Always get permission for private land access. Legal and ethical considerations. Tracking is legal on public lands. Here's how to stay compliant. Property access. Laws. Understand the difference between public land, national board forests, BLM land, state parks, wildlife management areas, and private property. Public land access rules vary. Some require permits, some have seasonal restrictions, research regulations for your specific areas. Wildlife harassment regulations. Federal Migratory Bird Treaty Act prohibits harassing migratory birds. State wildlife observation laws restrict approaching, disturbing, or stressing wild animals. Tracking should be observational. If animals alter behavior due to your presence, you're too close. Cultural appropriation. Awareness. Practicing with proper cultural respect honors the Lakota people who developed this knowledge. Always credit Lakota origin when discussing these techniques. Don't present yourself as expert in indigenous knowledge. Support Lakota-led educational programs and cultural preservation efforts. Hunting regulations. If tracking during hunting season, wear hunter orange as required by state law, even if not hunting yourself. Understand state licensing requirements, legal seasons, and permitted tracking methods for hunting purposes. Archaeological site protection. If you encounter what appears to be an indigenous heritage site, stone structures, artifact scatters, rock art, leave it undisturbed. Document location and report to appropriate authorities. These sites are protected by federal and state laws. Disturbing them is illegal and culturally disrespectful. Leave no trace principles. Minimize your impact while tracking. Stay on durable surfaces when possible. Don't create new trails. Don't disturb vegetation unnecessarily. Pack out all trash. Leave areas as you found them. Photography. Ethics. Wildlife. Photography should prioritize animal welfare over images. Maintain respectful distances. If animals show stress, alert postures, alarm calls, movement away from you, back off immediately. Never bait, harass, or stress animals for photographs. Section 6. Conclusion and Transition. Master these beginner skills, work through intermediate development, challenge yourself with advanced applications, and you'll possess tracking abilities that connect you to landscapes in ways most modern people never experience. But as you practice and improve, remember, this knowledge is a gift from the Lakota people. It comes from a living culture with ongoing traditions and contemporary communities. Learning these techniques carries responsibility. The responsibility to practice with respect, to credit the source, and to support the preservation of Lakota cultural heritage. Here's how to engage with this knowledge ethically and support the communities who created it. Proper cultural attribution and acknowledgement. Before we go any further, let's be absolutely clear about something. Every technique you've learned in this video originates from the Lakota people, not Native Americans generically, not Plains Indians vaguely. The Lakota, specifically the 7 nations, Oglala, Brule, Miniconjou, Sanzark, Two Kettles, Hunkpapa, and Sihasapa. This knowledge required centuries of accumulated wisdom passed through generations, refined through understanding, and preserved against overwhelming odds. When you practice these techniques, you're using Lakota intellectual property. That comes with responsibility. Always credit the source. When you teach a friend to read tracks, mention Lakota origin. When you post tracking photos on social media, acknowledge where this knowledge comes from. When you successfully trail an animal using these methods, remember whose ancestors developed them, and use proper terminology. The word Sioux is a French corruption of an Ojibwe term meaning snake or enemy. It was never the people's name for themselves. Lakota is the correct term. This isn't political correctness. This is basic respect, using people's actual names and crediting their intellectual achievements. Position yourself as a respectful learner, not an expert in indigenous knowledge. Even if you practice for decades and become highly skilled, this remains Lakota traditional knowledge that you've been privileged to learn. Avoid general Native American stereotyping. Hundreds of indigenous cultures exist across North America, each with distinct knowledge systems. Lumping them together as Native American tracking erases specific cultural contributions. Be specific. This is Lakota tracking knowledge. Give credit where credit is due. Historical context of knowledge suppression. The miracle isn't that Lakota tracking exists, it's that it survived 150 years of deliberate cultural destruction. Understanding this history transforms these techniques from interesting Itzav hacks into profound acts of cultural resilience. Between the 1870s and 1970s, over a century, the US government implemented systematic policies designed to erase Lakota culture entirely. The reservation system confined nomadic buffalo hunters to fixed locations, deliberately destroying the lifestyle that required tracking knowledge. The buffalo were decimated, not accidentally, intentionally. Military policy explicitly aimed to starve plains tribes by eliminating their food source. From 30 to 60 million buffalo in 1800 to fewer than 1,000 by 1890. This wasn't just environmental disaster, it was calculated cultural genocide using starvation as the weapon. The boarding school era, 1879 through the 1960s, forcibly removed Lakota children from families, punished them for speaking their language, for practicing traditions, for maintaining cultural identity. The official policy was, kill the Indian, save the man. Lakota language was systematically suppressed. In 1900, approximately 50,000 fluent Lakota speakers existed. Today, only about 2,000 fluent speakers remain. The language that contains those 47 words for buffalo behavior, that encodes tracking knowledge in its very structure, that language is critically endangered. These aren't distant historical events. Many Lakota elders alive today attended boarding schools where they were punished for speaking their language. The trauma is generational and ongoing. Poverty rates on reservations like Pine Ridge exceed 50% and life expectancy is among the lowest in the Western Hemisphere. Health disparities, educational gaps, economic challenges, all direct results of systematic oppression. The fact that tracking knowledge survived this century-plus assault is nothing short of miraculous. It survived because Lakota elders refused to let it die. They taught in secret, they encoded knowledge in stories, they preserved traditions despite policies designed to destroy them. When you practice these techniques, you're benefiting from that resistance, that refusal to surrender cultural identity despite overwhelming pressure. That deserves recognition, respect, and support. Contemporary. Lakota. Cultural preservation efforts. Contemporary Lakota trackers are maintaining these traditions right now. Here's how to support them. Today only 2,000 fluent Lakota speakers remain. Language preservation is urgent. But Lakota communities are fighting back with remarkable programs. The Lakota Language Consortium runs immersion schools where children learn Lakota as their first language. These programs are showing results. Young fluent speakers are increasing. Youth cultural education camps teach traditional skills, tracking, hunting, horsemanship, traditional crafts, reconnecting young people with ancestral relied. Tribal colleges like Oglala Lakota College and Sinta University are documenting elder knowledge through academic programs that honor traditional knowledge systems. The Intertribal Buffalo Council, representing over 60 tribes, has restored more than 20,000 buffalo to tribal lands. This isn't just ecological restoration, it's cultural healing. The return of Tatanka to Lakota land reverses the deliberate decimation that was used as a weapon. Digital preservation projects are creating Lakota language apps, online knowledge databases, video documentation of traditional practices, ensuring knowledge survives in multiple formats. And contemporary Lakota trackers are actively teaching. They're working with youth programs, consulting with conservation organizations, leading workshops, maintaining living traditions. This isn't a vanishing culture. This is active, determined cultural revitalization by a resilient people refusing to let their traditions die. Ethical guidelines for knowledge use. Here's the difference between cultural appreciation and appropriation when using this knowledge. Appreciation. Learning techniques respectfully, crediting Lakota origin, supporting preservation efforts, positioning as a respectful learner, studying alongside Lakota history and contemporary issues. Appropriation. Taking knowledge without credit, commercializing without indigenous benefit, claiming expertise, presenting tracking as mystical, performing indigenous identity, ignoring living Lakota communities. Some knowledge remains sacred or private within Lakota communities. Not everything is meant to be shared publicly. If specific practices aren't documented in public ethnographic sources, don't assume you have access to them. Never commercialize traditional knowledge without indigenous partnership and benefit sharing. If you're profiting from teaching Lakota's tracking techniques, a significant portion should support Lakota communities. Don't appropriate spiritual practices. Tracking had spiritual dimensions within Lakota culture, but that doesn't mean you should start burning sage, doing vision quests, or performing ceremonies. Those practices belong to the culture. Support indigenous-led educational programs rather than non-indigenous experts. If you want intensive tracking training, seek programs taught by Indigenous knowledge keepers whenever possible. Practice cultural humility. Recognize the limits of outsider understanding. You can learn techniques, but you'll never fully understand the cultural context in which they developed. And that's okay. Stay humble about what you don't know. Supporting Lakota communities actionably. These 5 organizations directly support Lakota cultural preservation. Your $25 donation makes real impact. Lakota Language Consortium funds immersion schools, creates language learning resources, supports fluent speaker documentation. Every dollar directly supports language preservation, the foundation of cultural survival. Intertribal Buffalo Council restores buffalo to tribal lands, supports indigenous managed herds, combines ecological restoration with cultural revitalization. Buffalo restoration is both practical and deeply symbolic. Native American Rights Fund provides legal advocacy for treaty rights, sacred site protection, sovereignty issues, legal battles protect cultural practices and land rights. Thunder Valley Community Development Corporation supports Pine Ridge Reservation, economic development, housing, youth programs, sustainable community growth. Addresses contemporary challenges facing Lakota communities. You can also attend Lakota-led workshops and educational programs, paying to learn directly from knowledge keepers. Organizations like the Lakota Way Healing Center and cultural programs at Bear Butte State Park offer opportunities to learn from Lakota teachers, purchase from Lakota artisans, authentic Lakota artwork, crafts and goods, support indigenous economies. Avoid mass-produced native-inspired items made by non-indigenous sellers. Advocate for indigenous rights. Support the land back movement working to return stolen indigenous lands. Support treaty rights protection. Oppose projects threatening sacred sites like pipelines crossing treaty lands. Educate others. Combat stereotypes. Correct misconceptions about indigenous peoples. When you hear someone say Sioux, correct a Lakota. When tracking knowledge is attributed to vague Native Americans, specify Lakota origin. If you visit reservations, follow cultural protocols and support local businesses, spend money in indigenous communities rather than border towns. These aren't passive awareness gestures. These are concrete actions that directly support living Lakota communities. Recognition of living traditions. Lakota culture is not a historical artifact. It's a living, evolving tradition with a future. Contemporary Lakota people maintain deep connections to ancestral knowledge while navigating modern realities. Lakota trackers use smartphones to document sign. Language teachers use apps alongside traditional immersion. Buffalo restoration combines traditional management with modern conservation science. This is how living cultures work. They adapt, incorporate new tools, evolve, while maintaining core identity. Young Lakota people are reclaiming traditional practices with pride and determination. The generation rising now is revitalizing what previous generations fought to preserve. Indigenous knowledge isn't just historically interesting, it's critically relevant to contemporary challenges. As climate change disrupts ecosystems, traditional ecological knowledge offers insights. Western science is only beginning to appreciate. Support present-day Lakota communities, not just romanticized historical past. The people who created this knowledge are still here, still maintaining traditions, still fighting for cultural survival. They deserve your support, your respect, and your partnership in preservation efforts. Section 7, Conclusion and Transition. Understanding this cultural context transforms these tracking techniques from mere life hacks into profound gifts from a resilient people. When you practice these skills with proper respect and support preservation efforts, you're participating in keeping alive knowledge that powerful forces tried to destroy. Now let's bring everything together and talk about your specific next steps for beginning your tracking journey while honoring its Lakota origins. Immediate action steps. Pause this video right now and schedule your first 15-minute tracking session in your calendar. Seriously, pull out your phone, open your calendar. Pick a day this week, ideally tomorrow. Block off 15 minutes, label it first tracking practice. That's step 1. Commitment. Step 2, find your location. Search nature preserve near me or hiking trails near me. Pick the closest one with confirmed wildlife activity. You're going there for your first session. Step 3, get a field journal. A simple weatherproof notebook works perfectly, $5 at any store. You'll use this to document every observation, every track, every discovery. Step 4. During your first session, complete a 15-minute observation sit. Sit quietly, notice everything. Document what you see, hear, smell. This begins your tracking journey. Step 5. Find and photograph your first animal track. Use iNaturalist or online tracking guides to identify the species. Measure it. Record conditions. Congratulations, you're now a tracker in training. Step 6. Join an online tracking community. Cybertracker forums, Facebook groups for tracking, Reddit's r/tracking community. Connect with 50,000 plus tracking enthusiasts learning these skills together. Step 7. Donate $10 to $25 to a Lakota cultural preservation organization. Lakota Language Consortium, Intertribal Buffalo Council, Thunder Valley CDC. Your contribution supports the people who created this knowledge. This donation isn't optional charity, it's ethical reciprocity. You're benefiting from Lakota intellectual property. Contributing to their cultural preservation is the right thing to do. 7 steps. You can complete all of them this week. The 30-day tracking challenge. Take the 30-day tracking challenge. I guarantee you'll see wildlife differently forever. Here's the framework. For 30 consecutive days, practice tracking 15 to 30 minutes daily. No exceptions, no skipped days. Document every session, photograph tracks, journal observations, build your personal tracking database. Set a progression goal. By day 30, successfully follow an animal trail for 100 plus yards without losing it. Share your journey. Post progress photos in tracking communities. Ask questions, get feedback from experienced trackers. Add cultural learning. Read one book by a Lakota author alongside your skill practice. Joseph Marshall III's The Lakota Way, Nick Estes's Our History is the Future. Zitkala Sa's writings. Learn about the culture that created this knowledge. At month's end, review your journal. You'll be amazed at your progress. The tracks that look like random marks on day 1 will tell you stories by day 30. Celebrate that progress, then set your next 30-day goal. Community engagement opportunities. Search. Meet up for local tracking clubs. Contact your state wildlife organization about naturalist societies. These groups meet regularly for tracking practice, knowledge sharing, and field trips. Weekend workshops happen nationwide. Tracking schools offer intensive 2 to 3 day courses for $200 to $500. Week-long immersions run $1,000 to $2,000. These accelerate learning dramatically. Online forums provide ongoing education. YouTube channels offer free video learning. Channels focusing on wilderness skills, tracking, and traditional knowledge. Find a mentor. Reach out to local hunters, wildlife biologists, nature center staff. Many experienced people love sharing knowledge with enthusiastic learners and teach others. Taking a friend or family member tracking reinforces your own learning. Teaching forces you to articulate what you know, strengthening understanding. Community transforms solo practice into shared journey. Continued heritage, learning. Path. This video introduced Lakota tracking, but ancestral wisdom extends far beyond one technique from one culture. We drop new heritage hacks videos every week revealing techniques ancestors mastered better than modern alternatives. Ancient navigation methods, traditional fire making, indigenous water purification, ancestral food preservation, emergency shelters, natural medicine. Subscribe so you never miss these explorations of human ingenuity that modern society has largely forgotten. Build your learning library. Read tracking field guides, Tom Brown's guides, Mark Elbrock's Mammal Tracks and Sign. Study Lakota history and contemporary issues. Explore traditional ecological knowledge across cultures. Watch documentaries. Lakota Nation versus United States 500 Nations. Gather. Films that center indigenous voices and experiences. Visit museums and cultural centers respectfully. Many indigenous-run institutions welcome visitors interested in learning about heritage and contemporary culture. Make cultural preservation support a recurring commitment. Monthly donations, even small ones sustained over time, make significant impact. Final inspiration and vision. Tracking isn't just about finding animals, it's about becoming profoundly present in the natural world. You now possess knowledge that took centuries to develop. 5 sign reading categories, temporal estimation techniques, predictive modeling principles, Multi-sign synthesis, the foundation of sophisticated ancestral tracking. Every time you practice these skills, you honor the Lakota people who created and preserved this wisdom, despite overwhelming efforts to destroy it. When you practice these skills respectfully, you become part of keeping alive knowledge that almost disappeared. The modern world desperately needs this depth of observation and environmental connection. We need people who can read landscapes, who notice what others miss, who maintain relationships with the natural world beyond recreational consumption. Ancestral wisdom isn't primitive, it's sophisticated science we're only beginning to fully appreciate. Modern technology validates what indigenous people knew centuries ago. You're now part of this knowledge preservation and revitalization. By learning, practicing, sharing respectfully, and supporting living Lakota communities, you participate in cultural survival. The final hook. The landscape is speaking, it always has been. Lakota trackers learn to listen with extraordinary sophistication, reading stories written in grass, soil, and breath. That knowledge nearly vanished, but it survived. Now it's available to you. Will you pick up this ancient conversation? Will you learn to read what the earth is saying? Your ancestors, all our ancestors, regardless of culture, once possessed this intimate relationship with the natural world. It's not lost. It's waiting for you to reclaim it. Start today. Take that first step and walk the path with respect for those who created it. Like this video if you're committed to learning these skills. Comment which technique you'll practice first. Subscribe for weekly Heritage Hacks videos. Share this with someone who needs to see what ancestral wisdom can teach us. The trail is open. The landscape is speaking, the knowledge is preserved. Now it's your turn to listen. I'll see you on the trail.